AmericanEagle.com is the website. 1-877-WEB-NOW-1 is the number.
Wow, how the world has changed in just a few short weeks. If there is one thing COVID-19 has taught us, is good hygiene. Wash your hands more often and wipe down frequently touched surfaces. Unfortunately, we also face another problem that has been around us since, well, time itself. Rodents. G'day, I'm Scott from Plug-in Pest Free. Rodents usually carry diseases with them we do not want around us. Treating the problem the old-fashioned way with baits and traps only causes the problem to continue. Baits invite rodents in when you really should be trying to keep them out. So how do we keep them out? With Plug-in Pest Free, an electromagnetic device that utilizes the electrical wiring in your home to set up a no-go zone. Now that's fair dinkum. Look us up today at gopestfree.com. Use promo code PEST20 for 20% off. That's gopestfree.com. Promo code PEST20. Don't spray and regret. Plug in and forget.
It's open enrollment season, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry that saves most families about $500 a month. Google MediShare and see if it is a fit for you.
6:37. Team Hochberg Traffic Center time and Jim Talamonte.
Well, if you're headed to O'Hare this morning via the Kennedy Expressway at westbound 190, there's a crash at River Road. 2 left lanes are blocked. We're still showing a travel time of 20 minutes from downtown Chicago to O'Hare. Still some patchy fog. The flight numbers as far as cancellations at O'Hare, fairly typical in these times. 627 cancellations today. Midway reports 171. Eisenhower inbound at Sacramento. There's a crash. Again, it's 28 minutes, 390 to downtown. Inbound Ryan on the ramp to the inbound Stevenson. There's a collision as well, though that ramp is open. Park City got a collision, 41 south of Washington. It's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. In our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center, turning mostly cloudy, breezy by the afternoon, and then a good chance of severe weather sneaks into the forecast. A shower or thunderstorm, high 70. Cloudy, breezy, rain, maybe a thunderstorm early overnight, low 52. Tomorrow, much cooler, occasional rain and drizzle, and a high of 55. Currently 50 at O'Hare. Next news at 7. Breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Robert Barrow, he's a Harvard economist. He's posted a working paper at the National Bureau of Economic Research looking at the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918-1919. And he finds that although quarantining flattened the curve back in 1918 to September 1918 to February 1919, in the sense of reducing the ratio of peak to average deaths, the estimated effect on overall deaths was small and statistically insignificant, meaning no isolation, no quarantine, no lockdown versus lockdown. The estimated effect on overall deaths was small and statistically insignificant. He suggests the likely reason that the quarantines were not more successful in curtailing mortality is that the interventions had an average duration of only around 1 month. He suggests if you wanted to curtail mortality in a statistically significant way, you would have to maintain isolation for more like 12 weeks at minimum. Just interesting in terms of efficacy as we continue to first just address the lockdown versus no lockdown and what the implications are. We also have...
Are we in week 6, by the way? I can't remember. Or week 7?
And week 4. I mean, it's the March 20th to, April 28th, so week 5.
Also, we're shooting my skis there.
Although this from T.J. Rogers, founder and CEO of Cypress Semiconductor, founding CEO of Cypress Semiconductor, writing the Journal. He and his team of eggheads did a little bit of a numerical analysis, the way that our friend Will Riley at Kentucky State did a regression analysis, finding, again, no statistic significance between locking down and not locking down in terms of impact. They looked at a one variable correlation of deaths per million and days to shut down, which ranged from minus 10 days, how many days it took to shut down, minus 10 days to 35 days for South Dakota, one of 7 states with no shutdown. The correlation coefficient they found was 5.5%, so low that the engineers I used to employ would have summarized it as no correlation and moved on to find the real cause of the problem if it was in the context of his semiconductor business. His engineers would have said 5.5% is a no correlation conclusion. We need to continue searching for the real cause. By contrast, other variables like population density or subway use were more important. One correlation coefficient for per capita death rates versus population density, 44%. That suggests New York City might have benefited from its shutdown, but blindly copying New York's policies in places with low COVID-19 death rates and
no public transportation
or limited, not on the scale of New York, such as my native Wisconsin, doesn't make sense, writes Rogers. They also looked at Sweden, as we have
many times on the show.
And we'll continue to, because it's a track over time. Sweden asked, again, only seniors to shelter in place rather than shutting down the rest of the country. Sweden has had no pediatric deaths, by the way. 0.
Right, and they've not shut down the schools.
How'd they do? They suffered 80 deaths per million, 21 days after crossing the 1 per million threshold. Sweden's death rate is lower than that of the 7 hardest hit U.S. states: Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Louisiana, Connecticut, Michigan, New Jersey, and New York, all of which, except Louisiana, shut down in 3 days or less. And Sweden also, as we've talked about, is the middle of the pack with Europe. In point of fact, as the fabulous Bakersfield boys pointed out, no statistical significance between Sweden and Norway with respect to deaths per million. So I just use that as the backdrop to say legal action like was taken by State Representative Darren Bailey, who we spoke to last week, to enjoin Governor Pritzker's executive order extending shelter-in-place statewide through May 30th, has a scientific basis. It has a public health basis. It's not just R versus D. It's not just I want to end the lockdown because I want to play golf. No, there's actually a lot of data that supports the substantive position before you get to the question of whether or not Pritzker exceeded his statutory authority, constitutional and statutory authority, with the shelter-in-place order.
And he tried to defend himself yesterday, Pritzker did, saying Jasper County has the highest rate of COVID cases per capita. Like, you can't compare any county to Cook County. But then during his daily briefing, he found out about the judge's ruling, and now Darren has a new name, Dangerous Darren.
That is the danger that Darren Bailey has put this state in. You've just stated it perfectly succinctly. People are in danger as a result of this ruling, of the judge's ruling, of the suit that was brought by Darren Bailey. We certainly are going to act in a swift fashion to try to have this ruling overturned. Certainly put a stay in place. I mean, it's frankly, it's insulting, it's dangerous, and people's safety and health has now been put at risk. There may be people who contract coronavirus as a result of what Darren Bailey has done now.
All right, we're pleased now to be joined by public enemy number one and super spreader, Darren Bailey, state representative, Southern Illinois, Louisville, Illinois, Clay County, Illinois. Darren, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, theme music. You seem like such an unassuming guy. I had no idea the threat that you posed to my health and the health of 13 million Illinoisans, according to Governor Pritzker. So how do you respond to what you heard from the governor?
Yeah, well, I guess now you know, and that, so the whole purpose of this suit, really, he he summed it up. You know, when you have sole control and power, which this guy seemingly loves, you will say anything to keep it. And that's exactly what I believe is going on with these ridiculous words that came from his mouth yesterday. So, you know, you guys, what you were talking about before with the Spanish flu and you know, the event of 100 years ago, interestingly enough, we have the Illinois Department of Public Health has a 120-page law plan document, the Pandemic Influenza Preparedness and Response Plan. And what you talked about quarantining not being effective, it's spelled out there on page. It's all spelled out here. This plan exists, and these facts that we've been talking about, they're in this document. And this document was updated on March 2nd, of this year. So
let me read from that document, if you will. This is from the Illinois Department of Public Health plan. Maybe an enterprising reporter could ask this question of the governor during one of his press briefings. Quote, no person may be ordered to be quarantined or isolated, and no place may be ordered to be closed or made off limits to the public, however, except with the consent of the person, or the owner of the place, or upon the order of a court of competent jurisdiction. Well, if you're not getting consent and there's no court order, then what do you have, Darren?
Yeah, so that's what, I think Mr. Madigan and Governor Pritzker, I think the pair of them, they finally got to this point to where, I mean, that's what we've got here. It's a power grab. And this document allows local government, local health departments to regionally take care of their situations, not a one-size-fits-all, as Governor Pritzker has suggested. I mean, good grief. Every one of his models have been wrong so far. He fails to answer questions, as Amy has proved, and he fails. He wants to give us his facts and data, but he fails to answer back with the facts and data that we asked for.
And so with this ruling, though, this applies only to you. Have people reached out to you to possibly start a class action lawsuit?
Yes, they have. Many people have reached out on what do we do, how do we do this, and I've been able to give them advice. I mean, I guess ultimately it's my understanding that when this thing reaches the end of the trail, and I mean, this is a totally constitutional argument. So any judge that would rule against this would be, in fact, going against our Constitution and our freedoms. So obviously, when this reaches its end game, basically what's good for me is going to be good for everybody else. And ultimately, I think that's what the government is so afraid of, that this extension of his ruling coming up on May 1st. So, because it's going to expose the failure of Governor Pritzker as a governor. That's what this is. That's what this is doing. And
importantly, just developing a little bit more. So the injunction, just so people are clear, applies to you, Darren Bailey, as a private citizen. It doesn't apply to Clay County. It doesn't apply to the other 101 counties. So it's not a statewide injunction. And essentially, and the reason that Pritzker was so vociferous in his reaction and is moving so quickly through Attorney General Raoul to appeal the decision is because it's potentially the first domino. Your complaint is the first domino to fall. It may encourage other residents and businesses in other counties to pursue the same, or maybe get together in a class and pursue an injunction at the statewide level, and that's what they're concerned about.
Yes. Yep, that's what you say is correct.
Well, what have you heard from your constituents? Are they pleased with your lawsuit that you filed?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, everybody down. Not everybody. You've always got the naysayers. You've got the people who are fearful, who are buying into this this drama that the governor is offering. I mean, by no means, this is this situation. It's much like a wintertime event when the flu is going around, and you do things to protect yourself. Maybe you don't go to church, maybe you stay in from shopping or an event, and the destruction. That's what's also interesting in this document from the health department. It also talks about the danger of what a quarantine would do to destruct an economy, and that's ultimately that's what drove this. As I mentioned last week, the simple fact of how the governor has failed what he does have authority over, and that's the IDES and this unemployment situation, because our phones still ring off the hook with people in our district and around who still is we're going on 5 weeks now of some people being laid off, and they still cannot get through to IDES to file their unemployment claim.
Yeah,
and
he's too busy. He's too busy. He's too busy being a management consultant at large and I do mean at large, for the federal government and the federal response to focus on his core responsibilities, it would seem.
No, he's asked that question every day, Dan, and he has it. Well, then they can call the governor's office. Well, those phone lines are jammed and the mailboxes are full. So what are people to do? There's no answer. There's no plan.
I don't know. He seems pretty popular up here in Chicago, so people don't care. So,
right.
whatever.
People don't have to wake up.
Yeah, I mean, as they say, he's popular up here, so what are you going to do about it? That's what he's saying. What are you going to do about it? It's the same thing, Madigan. It's the same thing. A lot of Republicans who are in liege with the Democrats in Chicago have said, what are you going to do about it? Go ahead and bitch. Go ahead and complain. We'll dismiss you with some throwaway phrase like call the governor's office so that we can move on. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. And Darren Bailey's done something about it. And anytime somebody does something about it, even just one person, particularly a legislator who has some standing, the whole system goes into cardiac arrest because everything is a threat to the established order. And now Darren Bailey is a threat to the established order, so he's public enemy number one. That's my summation on it.
Yeah. Dangerous, Dan. What do you think of your new
moniker? And so what about, Darren, what about other Republicans, including your brethren in Southern Illinois? Are they supportive of this? Is there going to be a concerted effort to advance this, or are they just sort of quietly cheering you from the sidelines or playing Pontius Pilate like your caucus leader, Jim Durkin, who said, we'll just see what happens?
Well, the reform group is certainly behind me. I wanted them on this suit, but the the lawyer suggested that this only needed to have one person for expediency and for efficiency to get through the court. So yeah, there's as you suggest, many are cheering on, but there's a handful scattered out throughout the state who have been super supportive. So, but yeah, the reform group's all on board, and then several others throughout the state are seriously on board, and everyone else is kind of sitting back and seeing where this goes.
What do you say? Because I've been contacted by a bunch of people who want to get involved too, just regular people. Would you say that this is if you want to move this along? I mean, if the collective you, if we want to move this along, it's going to require business owners and regular people to step up and intercede, because particularly politicians up here in Chicago Metro, where the lockdown is popular, nobody's going to do anything like you have done. So it's going to be up to just individual citizens, business owners, people to act.
Right. And that's the unfortunate thing, because we're told to trust the doctors, trust the scientists, and all the while the way of life, the economy, just goes into self-destruct mode. And I firmly believe that the repercussions of that are going to far outweigh anything that this pandemic is going to do, because I'm hearing that as well whenever constituents call in and panic about what they're going to do, because they haven't even been able to get in to unemployment, and they've been without a paycheck for 4 to 5 weeks. So that's what ultimately drove me to do this. And you're right. People are going to have to step up, and everybody's scared to, because everybody people don't know what tomorrow looks like when they wake up and read the news, and people are going to have to step up. That's what we do here in America. That's what we've always done.
Right, and he's so out of control. I mean, what's your reaction on, I think it was Sunday, he said teachers should prepare for e-learning for the fall.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think people in your Clay County are going to say if you guys can't go to school in the fall?
Yeah, that's a shame that we're well, he laughed at Southern Illinois, whenever asked a question about a downstate situation about regionalization, and he literally laughed at that. So no, this guy, the only thing he's taking serious is the future of whatever power that he can enjoy.
Do you think that we should just come to sort of unanimous consent to dissolve the General Assembly and dissolve the courts? Because Pritzker he cheerleads when Democrats around the country at the federal level go to court to enjoin every and any executive order that President Trump issues, and that's fine. It's your right to seek redress in the courts if you'd like. But here that this gets in the way of being governed by this one man and his whims, and he's very upset about this, and so are other people. They're upset that you went to court and got a judge to make a ruling on the merits with respect to his executive order as it pertains to you. He's very upset about that. So in the interest of not getting anybody upset in these difficult times, maybe we should just dissolve the General Assembly and the court system.
Well, that's certainly been the case. I think that's the story for 2020, been inactive, and that's how you gain power. History books show us what this leads to, and that's why people have to stand up. We've got many stories of dictators and regimes throughout the world and throughout history, and this is exactly how it's done. It's something as a situation takes place, people are being told what these leaders want them to hear, and they buy into it, and they do nothing. And that's that we cannot afford that, nor have that in this country, nor this state.
And just on the merits again, this other perspective from Pat Delfino, to Pat Delfino from David Robinson, the Chief Deputy Director of the Illinois Office of the State's Attorney Appellate Prosecutor. He supports the stay-at-home recommendations, social distancing. He writing in his memo to his director, these are lawyers, it appears that the stay-at-home recommendations and social distancing are great recommendations. Those things should be practiced, but criminal enforcement of the executive order is a different question. My research leaves me less than confident that a reviewing court will hold that the governor has the authority to close businesses, bar attendance at church services and assemblies in excess of 10 citizens. From a strict enforcement standpoint, although well-intentioned on an emergency basis, the executive order is very broad and does not appear to meet strict scrutiny. This is not to mention the EO appears to be beyond the framework of the specific act it cites as support. That's a pretty strong indictment of the legality of the executive order, but nobody apparently is interested in the legal merits of the argument.
Yeah, that's correct. The governor does not have that authority, and that's what was proven yesterday in this local court. However, local county health departments do have that authority, but that decision can be challenged within 48 hours in a court if the person so chooses that this decision was rendered upon a business or a person quarantined. So that's what's so dangerous about this.
Thank you, Darren Bailey, State Representative, 109th District, Louisville, Illinois, and Clay County. Representative Bailey.